So anyway, good morning. Welcome to this presentation. The last day of 4C has just started. I just want to thank Wargaming for putting this on, obviously, inviting me. I have not timed this. There's also there's nothing to look at. I just realized. Can we do something about that? Because I can see my presentation slides, but nobody else. Oh, awesome. Great. So I haven't timed this, but if I'm here, still here at noon, somebody should probably drag me out. Let's see, let's turn this thing on as well. So this is it's called From Startup to Standard, business advice from a decade of Simplygon. Even though it's business oriented, there won't be any KPIs or formulas or numbers or how to negotiate term sheets or development methodology or whatever. The takeaway, if any, will be I'm going to give a short background story of my decade with this company, some personal reflection, and kind of 10 years of doing business in the industry. So it will be more meta than anything else. Nothing revolutionary. I'm sure you've heard stuff like this before. Hopefully, everyone will have something to take away. So, my name is Martin. I'm almost 40 from Sweden. I grew up playing pen and paper role-playing games and video games and all the other kinds of games that you know about and probably make on a daily basis. My claim to fame, if you will, is that I was one of the founders of a company called Simplygon around 10, 11 years ago. My LinkedIn profile says I'm an entrepreneur and business developer. I work as an advisor and kind of angel investor, really newbie, but still that's what I'm doing right. I've been wanting to make a game for some years, so I made a plan with a bunch of friends. So we're gonna start a studio. It's gonna be maybe in 2 years or something. So now I'm keeping occupied until that happens. Very, very briefly, on the board of 3 Gates, Swedish game developer, we recently released Offensive Combat Redux, which is a fast-paced competitive shooter. The twist is you can wear masks, look like Trump, shoot Trump, or chickens. There's also a lot of poning stuff going on. You can actually fart at your dead opponents and a bunch of other very mature stuff. Really fun. We also have a license for PBR, Professional Bull Riders, which is the fastest growing license in the entertainment industry right now. Bigger than UFC and NFL, which is kind of strange when you think about it. I'll actually skip this. I'll skip that too. I'll skip that too. How many people are familiar with Simplygon? A few, all right. So this is what it looks like now. It's called Simplygon Studios. And, oh, that's a translation. That's interesting. Anyway, so Simplygon is a pipeline middleware or toolchain middleware. It's been used in hundreds of games. In 2015, we said that 85% of the top-selling AAA titles used Simplygon in one way or another. So it's pretty much a de facto standard for game development. What it actually does is automatic optimization of 3D meshes. So for example, the guy on my left looks like the guy on my right, but he has about 90% of the data, if you will, used for level of detail, stuff like that. So polygon reduction, simplifying materials, creating standing objects, merging, various parts together, etc., etc. So necessary for game performance, but a tedious process that Simplygon automates with intelligent algorithms. Just an example of level of detail in games. Again, this is something you can create automatically with Simplygon. So how did we start this? It's not that I can't mention names or anything, but I chose to kind of use these personas for the founders instead. So the inventor, long-time games industry coder, he worked at Refraction, UDS, DICE, etc., until he kind of broke off and started writing Simplygon first lines of code. The PhD, unfortunately not in 3D graphics, but pretty smart guy. He actually left pretty early to pursue his research career. My very old friend, the designer, had some experience with 3D from his like architecture, industrial design background kind of thing. And then I think I was the only person they knew who went to business school, which is why we ended up together. So what do we have here? 4 founders. One guy knows vaguely what he's doing. We have no experience in running a company, starting a company. We don't really know anyone in the industry, except maybe for the inventors' old work pals. I interviewed some people when I wrote my master thesis, actually kind of in disguise because we wanted to start a company, but that's a different story. We definitely didn't have any money, and we also had a product that everyone that we talked to knew didn't work because polygon optimization was nothing new. It's been around since like the 70s or 80s or whatever. But doing it automatically with algorithms, everybody's like, that doesn't work. So we were off to kind of a rough start. There's also this attitude in the games industry. It's not as prevalent now as before, but you go to somebody and say like, hey, I have this thing, and there's like, why should I license your tech when I have a building full of engineers? We'll just build it internally, right? And you're like, okay, good luck with that. I'll see you in 6 months or whatever. But anyway, so it was kind of a rocky start. And just to give you a bit of an idea of how green we were, our first order came from Industrial Light and Magic. I think they probably had some kind of a polygon emergency and just Googled how to get rid of it. We came up. They placed an order for a product, but it wasn't available for download. We just got an email from the server that we had to reply to. So it was too late for them to buy it. I think they just solved it anyway. So lesson learned somehow. And then I get a phone call because I'm still at my the sales, like part-time sales job I had during university. So on my voicemail one day, it's a call from a guy. It's like, hey, it's so-and-so from this and that AAA studio. We kind of like your stuff, but it looks like the whole project is simply gone. And so I guess it took us too long to get back to them, or we were just not organized enough to deliver, so to speak. But anyway, quick timeline. The blue line is the revenue. I removed the numbers. It's just for scale, but just as another way of like showing what we did there. Founded the company in 2006. Kind of had a small takeoff when we found that there was a lot of Korean companies making MMO games with like tens of thousands of assets that needed optimization. Had some troubles anyway. We actually ran out of cash for different reasons. We were, I would say, forced to take on an external leadership for the first time. So we started our North American office, and things started to be pretty good. Raised some money that we kept in the mattress. Didn't really grow as fast as we wanted to. So, one thing led to another, and we actually had another external CEO that was supposed to help us kind of break into other industries like automotive, enterprise, I guess you would call it. Here's another way to just saying what we did for 11 years. Nothing really happened in the beginning, and then we had some growth, and then we sold the company. So that was the background, 11 minutes of it, or something like that. The advice that I kind of promised you in the description are kind of what are my experiences from these 10 years, this decade of running this company. What am I taking with me when I move on in my career, or for my next 10 years, or whatever? It's like, what did we do well at Simplygon? What did we suck at? Was there anything, worth mentioning, or, and if one of these things stick with you, then I'm happy. I guess they're all kind of advice for people running or starting their own businesses, but hopefully there's something for everyone. That's what I just said, I just realized. So all these things, you've maybe even heard them before, and they're easy to say, kind of easy to do, but really hard to master, right? So I'll start with the most cheesy one. And essentially, if you run a company or if you have a company and you don't make money, you're kind of screwed. if you have a lot of investment money, maybe short term, you're fine. But at the end of the day, like business is about making money, right? Usually, making money includes some kind of sale, but I think you shouldn't stop there. You can't just have the sales guys that take a product and sell it. Like the whole team obviously needs to know, we need to ship X amount of this, otherwise there's no fruit basket, there's no Jolt Cola, there's no Red Bull, there's no coffee. And just, have that kind of mentality throughout. I think we found a lot of times, like the sales and the marketing and whatever was so disconnected from development, because we don't necessarily share like mutual interests and daily routines. But that's something that's, I think it's important. And then another classic, cash is king. A lot of failed businesses are actually profitable. They make money. They just don't have any cash to pay their bills. This can be really dangerous, and it's not, the advice part of this isn't so much that, because I guess you already know that, right? And it's, it's easier to not spend money than actually forcing people to put money in your account. So that's the controllable part, like how much money are we spending on these things, right? But the thing is, what happens when you run out of money based on like personal experience is that you don't have to go bankrupt. There's always some guy coming in and say like, I've got money, but it's not free, right? So there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. It's a very classic statement. So having no money can spiral pretty quickly. You have to dilute, have to take maybe on people that you don't really want in your company, maybe people who don't share your vision or understand where you're going or what you want to do with this, right? So that might be a good reason to actually hold on to your cash. And then what I want to talk a little bit about is, like, you can read a lot of management books and you can look up to a lot of people like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or whatever. Great businessmen, great leaders, I guess. But they have their own way, right? So if you try to copy what they do, that's probably going to fail. It's great to be inspired, but you can only be yourself. And in the end, if you take on something like this, or if it's just, maybe a leadership role or something else, you're going to just go with what you think is right. And I think we went our own way most of the time. We were advised to do a lot of things, and we didn't always listen, but it's good to be inspired, like I say, by people with more experience. But fundamentally, it's up to you. And I just want to say with this, it's a little over the top, but it's like you can actually turn down advice from people that are more experienced than yourself. Something that we found is that people will just say a lot of stupid stuff. You can be in a meeting, like a board meeting or something like that, and it's just, people will, they're there to help you, but they don't know the product as well as you do. They don't know the market as well as you do. They don't know your vision, or maybe even agree with it. But they have to say something because they're, your paid advisor, or maybe they own shares in the company or whatever. So me and my colleague, we actually found this dry mouth syndrome, which is like you got a bunch of people. Classically, they're men in their 50s, but whatever. And when they haven't said anything for a while, they just have to say something. They just blurt out the first thing that comes to mind. Hopefully on topic, but still. And you go like, wow, you're so experienced. I should probably do whatever it was you just said. No, you don't really have to. Again, it goes back to what I said. You can listen to what more experienced people have to say, but they're not going to know your company as well as you or your product. So go with what you think. Otherwise, what am I doing here, right? So this is about focus. And the reason why it's impressive to see somebody juggling chainsaws is that it's difficult. And one is fine, but when you have three and they're all turned on, that becomes kind of an interesting situation. So what I want to say with that is obviously, like, don't take on more than you can deliver. And if you have to make a decision, I say follow the money. What we wanted to do at Simplygon was to expand from games into other industries. We knew that very early on. Because the product in itself isn't that different. 3D is 3D, but there's a lot of different pipelines. There's a lot of different, like, fundamental understanding of what you do. So we had a black box with cables sticking out, and you hand it to a game developer, and they're like, connect it, and they have a functioning pipeline, and you go to somebody at some other company, and they're like, I just want to go from Revit to Unity. And it's like, we didn't really have the manpower to build an integration for every single company. So after a while, we're like, oh, we're going back to games. We're just staying in games for now. So don't spread yourself too thin. It's the same thing with personal stuff. Like, I was the CEO of Simplygon. I picked up the mail. I did everything. I paid the taxes and the invoices and everything else. And I was the seller and the marketer and everything else. So after a while, we just didn't have any money left, and I didn't really understand why. But it was my responsibility, right? So obviously, I was not the CEO of my company anymore, and so stuff happens when you're spread too thin, right? That's kind of my point. So if you can afford to actually outsource stuff, like, whatever somebody else does better than you, do it as quickly as possible. I have to speed up here. Okay, so essentially, you are the leader of whatever you're the leader of, whether it's a company or a department or a team or whatever it is. It's fine, right? I think it's cool to have people look up to you and having to kind of, rely on you or whatever. As long as you believe in yourself, it's fine. But you got to be a little bit humble about it, because nobody likes an asshole, right? Which brings me to my next point. I don't know if you follow Silicon Valley or not, but there's a great scene where Ehrlich tells Richard that he needs to be an asshole. It's really funny. I can't really spoil it any more than I just did, so go watch it unless you've seen it. But the point of this is you have to be a dick sometimes. Because this whole business thing or leadership thing is a lot about decision making. Everyone's not going to be super impressed or happy with what you decide for them in this case, or customers or suppliers, whatever it is. You can't do what we did 10, 11 years of this. We stepped on some toes, right? You might as well just realize it and embrace it. And it's not your job to make friends with everyone. It's more like building your business, surviving, striving. So that's fine. Moving on to more decisions. This is Wayne Gretzky said this is almost too cheesy to quote, so let's skip by it. The point of this is, again, like, you got to make decisions. It's actually a privilege and a responsibility as a business leader or a leader, team leader, whatever. Obviously, you need to be informed about what's going on, but just don't think it to death. If you have to make a decision, I say just make it. And then if it somehow turns out to be stupid, then you go back and say, like, okay, maybe that wasn't the smartest thing to do. Let's do this instead and move on with your life. I don't say go around being a clown and be irresponsible, but the only thing that's for certain that's going to happen while you ponder your thing that's going on is that time flies and somebody else might, do something smart in the meantime. Another thing, which is it's actually one of my favorites, is that you need to trust your team. And where I'm from, it's not that weird. Sweden has a very flat company structure, not too much hierarchy. The thing is, people will look to you for leadership and guidance, but you don't have to have all the answers, right? it's fine. To actually hire someone and let them do a job without looking over their shoulder all the time. There's a lot of like talk about nano management and whatever. I just say that if you hire somebody into a company and you give them a job to do, just let them do it. And if it doesn't work out, you hire the wrong person. Or worse, you're just not the right manager, which would be a bigger problem. So if you don't trust people, you can't delegate. If you can't delegate, you're gonna hit a wall sooner or later. Another thing that when we started the company, I thought this was like one of the most it wasn't a big deal. It was that people talk about these 51%. You have to own 51% of your company. I was like, take it easy, man. What can happen? The thing is that it can be really dangerous to get external people on board who doesn't share your vision or have just your personal interests are not their personal interests, right? They might be a venture capitalist or somebody else that comes on board. And I'm saying it's not bad. It's just that we have to kind of think about this because it just seems to me like a lot of people, either because they're from a culture or because of their personal style, they will just take more than they need, and they will just essentially what I say, like fuck you over if you let them. Which is obviously why you need to support yourself with people that actually support you and what you're trying to achieve. And then when shit actually hits the fan, it will come to voting majority. Like it's just like a legal contract for a license or something. You don't necessarily visit the contract ever, but when something happens, that's when you need to go back and kind of have that backing or whatever. And so it's simply going to be pretty much really early on had a lot of people who had absolutely no idea what we wanted to do. We tried to tell them, but they weren't just listening. So that can be dangerous. Then something other that you've heard before, but this is my kind of personal take on it. It's really cool to work a lot. No, not really. So I used to think that, and it seems to be like this thing where Elon Musk is super happy to share that he works like 100 hours per week, and it's like, I mean, he's a unicorn or whatever. It's a very special guy, obviously. For the rest of us, even if we want to succeed in business and in life, I think that the time you take off is an actual investment in yourself, in your company. If you have to be there 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day, you're doing something wrong. I think you should carve out time for, meditation might be a big word here, but, do something that completely takes your mind off your work. Also, obviously, like physical exercise helps a lot of people focus. If you work 10 hours a day, maybe spend 1 more hour with your family and take the other one to just invest in taking care of yourself. The rest of the 8 hours is going to be more productive than the 10 hours you had before, in my mind. Obviously, this is not about like avoiding work or anything stupid like that. What is Arnie doing here at the Games Conference presentation, you wonder? And it's just the continuation of what I said before. I don't expect to turn a bunch of game developers into like paleo enthusiasts or triathletes or whatever, but it's like there is no mental. The brain is part of our body. If your body feels like shit, your brain's gonna feel like shit. End of story. There's like tons of ways to back this up, but I'll just say Google it. And improving your physical performance will increase your mental performance, thus your productivity. And I think this is extremely important. We're not super good at this in the games industry, I think, because sitting down and playing games is obviously not, something that builds stamina. But so I do that too, obviously. So it's nothing wrong with it. But just if you want to be successful, I think you should spend a few minutes every day or a few hours every now and then to work on that. You should incentivize people around you to do the same if you want to be in a productive environment. And then another thing that's really, really, really hard is to sleep enough for the same reasons. And I'm sure you remember what your mother said, or maybe you have read up on this before. But it's really important to get that extra productivity. I can't believe I made this. So in summary, always be closing. Selling is important, whatever role you have in a company. Cash is king. Don't spend money you don't have, because it will spiral and become really, really toxic. Don't let professionalism bog you down. This is about, don't try to be a big corporation or Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. Just be you. Get inspired instead and just, turn things into your own. Don't always do what other people tell you to do. Definitely don't do what I tell you to do all the time. Focus on as much as you can actually accomplish. Don't spread yourself too thin. Fuel your ego, whatever. Be an asshole. Learn to say no. Understand that it's okay to step on toes, and everyone else will, and you're going to come across a bunch of people that don't care about you. So just focus on your business, focus on your team, focus on putting it out there. Don't spend too much time pondering decisions. Just make them. And admit you were wrong, go back and redo it if it doesn't work out. If you hire someone, if you work with someone, let them do what they do. Don't look over their shoulder all the time. Otherwise, you made a wrong hire, or you're just not a good leader. Keep 51% of your company. It's not as stupid as it might sound. And then, spend some time, do yoga, work out, meditate. I don't know what you do, but find that thing that takes your focus off your work. And then the rest of your life is going to be much more productive. And let's go make some money. That's it.
Guys, it's always hard to be the first one, so thank you for helping us to support Martin.
Yes, thank you so much.
If you have any questions, just raise your hand and we will come over you with a microphone. Jeremy?
What's the hardest part about asking for money?
You just said it, asking for money. It's hard. No, it's, if I understand you correctly, asking for money is one of the hardest things to do, either because your personality type makes you cringe when you think about it, or just that sometimes it's hard to know the value of your product. And it's something that we experienced really early on, is that we tried to sell Simplygon as a plugin for $1,000. Nobody bought it, so we lowered the price to $300. A year later, it was $60,000, $70,000 because we just, rewired everything. But it was the same product essentially. But personally going to somebody and say, I think this product is worth this and this much to you. I think that's the value, and I think you should pay me that. I found that very hard in the beginning. It kind of, when you realize how many people rely on your product or how much they appreciate it, it's easier. Was that anything as a response? Okay, thanks.
Any other?
Thanks for the talk. Well, you said I must be an asshole if I'm in a room full of assholes, right? If I'm in a room full of nerds, should I become a nerd? And here comes the hardest part.
Yep.
If I'm in a room where half people are nerds and half are assholes, who should I become?
You. You should be you. Hopefully you're a nerd, because nerds are awesome people. I'm a nerd. Assholes, And again, if I go back to what I was talking about the slide, it's not literally not punching your grandmother, not pushing people in the cafeteria. It's just about realizing that your actions will have like adverse effects on some people. Like the nerds in the room might not appreciate that you say something to the assholes or the other way around. Just realize that. That's what I meant about the asshole part. You will step on toes, you might as well just embrace it. Yeah. All right.
We have many great people here at 4C today, and here's one of them. Hi, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Alexander Markovic. I am creative director at Ministry of Games, and I'm here to talk about city building games and design principles of those.
Nice. Do you remember your very first video game that you've played?
Sure, it was The Prince of Persia back in something like 89 or whatever it would have been. Yes.
It's a great game back in the day and still. What's your favorite game of all time today?
I guess I like mobile games, so at the moment I think my favorite game would be probably something like Brawl Stars or Clash Royale, so Supercell PvP titles, or on the other hand some city building titles like Township.
What do you think about the state of modern video game industry overall?
Well, I guess there is a lot happening at the moment, which is awesome. The core games are doing awesome stuff. The casual games are doing awesome stuff. So I think it is awesome that inclusion is happening on all sides, right?
Anything that maybe irritates or saddens you, something that you don't like in the state of game dev today?
Well, the only thing that might sadden us is the sometimes there is a bit of lack of inclusion happening, and sometimes there is a certain amount of kind of toxic behavior that occurs in the gaming circles. But other than that, I think it is just moving in the awesome direction.
Well, it is moving in an awesome direction, and we're here to try and foresee it. Speaking of which, what do you see happening in the industry in like a 10 years' time? What will be the new thing, the new trend, do you think?
Well, hopefully the mobile games stay relevant, right? But other than that, obviously AR and geolocation games are super interesting, and stuff that's happening with that is super exciting. And also, hopefully as things move forward, we get more inclusive or like more engaged worlds that we kind of play together in with each other. And I think this is something that we're hopefully moving towards too.
Well, you're part of the industry. You can help move it forward. Speaking of which, how did you end up in the industry? How did you come here?
Well, I guess as anyone else, I just kind of liked the whole idea of the escapism of the games that was offered to us as we were young, and I just kind of stick with them throughout my youth, and it was a logical choice growing older, right?
What's more important for you in games that you like graphics, storytelling, the gameplay, or maybe a combination?
I guess in the end, for me, it comes back to the community and kind of the shared experience of playing the games. So it is in the end about kind of multiplayer of it,
What about the single-player games then?
which are also awesome. There is nothing about games that is not awesome, right? So single player games also cool, whatever story-driven RPGs, story-driven text adventure games. There is nothing to dislike in those either, but for me, just kind of the multiplayer experience is something that drives the medium forward into kind of this new, less explored areas of just kind of playing with your, children or with your parents or with your grandparents. Why not? And I guess this is something that just excites me.
So the future is in multiplayer and socializing in games. Is that right for you?
Well, I hope it is I guess what I'm saying.
Well, we can move it over there. St. Pete, we're here today. What do you think about the city?
A beautiful city, repeat, repeat. Awesome times to be had all around, and I'm glad to be here. Thankful for the opportunity.
Glad to have you here. Also surprised you know the cult song about St. Pete. What about the conference? I know it's the first day, but what are your impressions so far? Maybe expectations?
Well, I've met some awesome people all around. I'm looking forward to hearing their talks, to hearing their thoughts on the future of gaming and the future of the industry, and I have high hopes.
Any specific speech you're maybe looking forward to? Somebody you want to listen to?
So there is, for example, the Greg Street, the design director of League of Legends, will be talking about using user feedback to improve your game design. So this is something that, for example, I'm very interested in. And also anything from game design track is something that appeals to me very much.
Well, hope you find it useful. And finally, if you were standing here in my place interviewing yourself, what question would you ask yourself?
Whoa, not sure at all.
I guess you have all the answers then.
Yeah, possibly.
Well, I hope you find more answers here on 4C, and thank you very much, and have a nice time.
Thank you.
So we've prepared a few questions for one of our speakers. Please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Ville Rauma from Fingersoft, Finland. So, yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too. Please tell me, what's the first game you have ever played, the video game?
I think that would probably be maybe Microsoft Flight Simulator 3. And
It was your very first, right?
yeah.
All right. Which one is your favorite today?
Right now, basically, Divinity Original Sin 2 is like really awesome.
It's amazing. I gotta agree with you there. And what led you to the gaming industry? How did you start?
Well, basically, I was studying in University of Oulu, and we had a training period where you go to a company, and there happened to be a game company in the list where you can pick where you want to go, and I was like, yeah, I want to go there. So that's how I got started.
So they just took you in?
Yeah, because it's like the companies kind of volunteer that we'll take trainees from the university, so you can kind of pick where you want to go. So yeah.
Sounds great. So what is your favorite thing about the video game industry today?
Well, I don't know. It's like it's really hectic, and it's quite kind of free kind of environment where people can really be, who they are, and it's kind of laid back. So I think that's pretty cool.
It generally is. But are there maybe things that make you mad or sad in the today's state of gaming industry?
Well, I don't know. Like, it's difficult to say. Sometimes there are things, but nothing pops to mind right now. Like maybe sometimes like they, especially like huge studios, kind of focus on single thing. You know how it is. Like sometimes there's only World War II games, and next you have only like future mech games or whatever. So it's like always these big trends and less about like innovation and new type of games. So maybe that.
Speaking of trends, do you see any trend surfacing in 10 years or so? How do you view the gaming industry in the nearest future?
Well, long term, like 10 years, I think probably there's gonna be big changes. Like of course VR, AR are big, but right now they're like really new stuff. So it's not really like a big business opportunity right now. But that's probably gonna be big in the future. I think it's gonna take a few years. But yeah, at least that.
So you feel like technologies are going to be the game changer here?
Well, at least with VR and AR, I feel like the experience is so awesome that when you do that, everybody who tries it thinks it's awesome. But right now, it's just too cumbersome and complicated to do. So I think that's the biggest issue there. But yeah, also of course, there's gonna be probably like different trends in the way games, like the kind of like the free-to-play model right now, how it is, probably will change. It's always changing. So yeah.
That's true. But speaking experiences, what do you think is more important in a game? Like the age-old question: it's the graphics, it's the gameplay, the storytelling.
Gameplay, of course. Yeah.
The simplest question of all. Okay. So what do you think about St. Petersburg?
I love it so far. It's the first time actually for me in Russia and in St. Petersburg. So yeah.
And what about the conference?
Yeah, it's looking really awesome. It's like well organized, so I like it.
What was the best question you were asked so far?
I don't know which game you are playing right now, of course, because I'm waiting to go back home so I can continue playing.
I completely understand you there. But which question would you ask yourself if you were interviewing yourself?
Oh, that's a hard one. What's going to be your next game? And I couldn't answer right now because we are working on a lot of prototypes and we'll see what it's going to be. But yeah.
Great. Are you looking forward to any specific presentation? Which do you want to listen to most?
Yeah, I did mark a few. I don't remember the titles right now, but they were like interesting because there's a lot of like really cool people here who know like a lot about a lot of things. So yeah. I think for me, maybe on the kind of leadership business track is maybe the most kind of interesting for me right now because that's my job. So, yeah.
Well, you're one of the cool people here, so thank you for coming and thank you for being a part of this.